Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick, your creativity and spiritual life coach, and your host of Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. What is the awakening? This is the moment in time when humanity rises up out of the darkness. Who is awakening? Each one of us present on earth today, reclaiming our sovereignty, seeking greater possibilities in our reality and looking for solutions. We know being awakened is not a lofty ideal but a necessity. If we can transform ourselves, we can change the world. Guests on Her Conversations will speak to your spirituality, sensuality and soul. Listen to their stories and hear how they are in service to the world. Let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. Before I go into this week's episode with Lauryn Axelrod, I just want to invite you to listen to the sister podcast, Her Inspirations. In each solo episode, I aim to inspire my midlife sisters to recognize and embrace the wisdom of their experience and allow this next season of your life to be the most free and fruitful. Midlife is your time to bloom. Links to those episodes are in the show notes below. My guest this week is Lauryn Axelrod. She is an ordained interfaith, interspiritual minister, chaplain, spiritual director and teacher. A graduate of One Spirit Interfaith, Interspiritual Seminary, she's also the founding spiritual director of Three Mountains Interspiritual Community. Lauryn writes the Substack newsletter Radical Spirituality, Getting to the Root of What Matters, and leads retreats and workshops virtually and in person. During our conversation, Lauryn shares about her spiritual journey, the connection between spirituality and creativity, and about her book, 10 Words, an interspiritual guide to becoming better people in a better world. So as always, I begin by asking my guest, HER is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel that higher energetic resonance?
You know, I have this practice where every morning I go outside, no matter the weather, and I just take in, I live in Vermont, so it's a beautiful area. I take in the nature. I take in the fact that it's a new day, a new beginning every day. And that fuels me. That's what gives me the higher energetic resonance. You know, it connects me to everything that is around me. It feeds my creativity. It feeds my spirituality. It connects me to whatever, what I call sacred. That starts my day.
Great way to start, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fantastic. So before we go into the conversation, I just want to give you a moment to introduce yourself to the listeners and tell a little bit about your story and how you got here.
So I am an interfaith, interspiritual minister, which is somewhat anomalous in the sense that most clergy are affiliated with a single religious tradition. And I'm not. I've studied all of them across the board. I've spent my lifetime seeking and studying, and eventually went to seminary to be ordained. And that really informs everything that I do. I'm also a creative. I'm also an artist, so that I don't see a difference. I don't see a difference between creativity and spirituality. We are creative beings. From the very beginning, the world is always in the process of creation constantly, and we're just part of that creation. So, going back, I grew up in a religious environment, not a singular tradition, but in an environment where I was getting religion every day, literally. And I was lucky because I got the good stuff, right? I didn't get the, fire and brimstone. I didn't get the guilt, shame. I didn't get any of that. I got the joy. I got the community connection. I got the love that was there. And it set me on a path of seeking. And in my teens, I got really involved in mysticism, and I got really involved in a lot of alternative, what we would consider alternative spirituality. I spent 15 years in Zen, another decade in Advaita Vedanta, and then most recently, real deep dive into Taoism, and had a wonderful teacher who sadly passed away 2 years ago. But really just involved not just in Western tradition, but also in Eastern tradition. And then I've spent time with shamans in the Amazon and, Sufis. And I mean, you name it, I've just been seeking.
Oh, I can align with much of what you've said. One, in terms of the spiritual seeking, having myself come from a religious background as well. My father was a pastor, so I was born into the center of the church, basically. But then also, the idea of creativity and spirituality just being one and the same thing, because that's basically what I base my work around, is the connection between creativity and spirituality. And I want to ask, lean into that for a second and ask you, when did it become clear to you that they were one and the same? I know my moments, but I'd love to hear what you thought.
That's a good question. Having been a creative my whole life, I started as a ballet dancer. And there's nothing more spiritual than moving to music, right? I don't know that I had a particular moment of thinking, wow, creativity and spirituality are the same thing. I know that when I'm in the flow, right, as a creative, when I'm making work, that I am just fully present in that moment. There's nothing else happening. And oftentimes I feel like I'm just the vessel, just the funnel. I don't know that when I was young, I would have put it into spiritual terms, but I do now. Because I know that we are just vessels for the creative energy, the creative force of the universe, however so named, right? However named.
To kind of come from what you said, it's like when I was younger, there was no word for it. I didn't know what it was. So I wasn't in my youth going, oh, here I am, bringing my spirit in. But it was just this curiosity about where all this stuff was coming from. Because I started as a pianist and a songwriter, and so it was just like, where do I get all of these things from? They're just, I'll go for a walk or I'll hear something and suddenly I'm able to turn it into something else that then is something that I can give to other people, show to other people and share with other people. And then when I started to veer into different spiritual modalities and hear different language and do different practices, like go into deeper meditations, and I'm like, I've been here before. I realized that those places that these meditations were guiding me to were it was somewhere that I'd been before, but I just didn't have the language for it. So I'm like, well, these are the same things, so that's where.
And that curiosity of, where does this come from? I still don't have an answer for you.
I'm not saying I know. Other than there is something else other than the physical, tangible, that then when you follow it through and place it into a form that's recognizable and experienceable, if that's a word, can be experienced by others, then that in itself is just magic and alchemy, and that's why I always encourage people to, there's something that you're doing that's bringing it through, so you recognize your own magic, recognize the creativity that you do have, because I think sometimes creativity gets kind of cornered just into the arts, which is one way of doing it, but creativity and your expression comes out in pretty much everything that you're doing at any point.
Literally everything. It's in every breath. If you think about it, when you take a breath and you breathe out, what are you creating? You're creating CO2, which is what nourishes the trees and the plants. Right. So it is literally every breath we take is our creativity. Every thought, every action, everything. And it's not just the arts. It's in everything we do, every idea, every word we speak. because when you speak, you bring something into being that didn't exist before. That is the definition of creativity, right? It's generating something new. You know, many years ago, I studied under a real visionary teacher, Pat Schneider, who taught a method of teaching creative writing to women who lived in housing projects in sort of rural Massachusetts. And her insistence was, you know, kind of a democratization of creativity. It's not just the artists who are creative. Everybody is. And people don't recognize that their creativity.
Like I say, I speak so many times to women who are like, well, you know, I'm just not creative. It's like, and it's almost like the feeling that it's been ring fenced away from them. So, you know, they just watch those people that are gifted that do it. It's, you know, you've just found a medium that sits in the arts. But if you see everything as art, you see your life as art, if you see what you're doing as your own creativity, it kind of shifts the way they start to show up in their life. Then really it's like everything that you're doing is art and can be your own artistry, and if you allow it to be that, then you will just have a different perspective on the way that you live and the way that you're putting things into the world. You
know, I think it's really empowering for people to see that everything they do, from the scientific theory they come up with to dinner, is creative, right? How you raise children, you know, how you build a garden, like anything that you're doing. And I find that when people can connect to their own creativity and their own spirituality, that they feel very empowered. You know? And that's something that I've tried to do throughout my life, you know, not just as a spiritual teacher, right? But I also taught, you know, I taught video production, I've taught dance, I taught theater, I taught creative writing. My whole thing has been, no, you can do this. And when you do, you will find yourself expanding.
Right.
Your sense of your own self-worth, your own value. When you realize that everything you do is putting something out into the world. That's powerful.
Yeah. Literally making your mark on the world. Like you just. So tell me about your new creation.
Oh, my new creation, which is actually an old creation, right? It's not my book, 10 Words, An Interspiritual Guide to Becoming Better People in a Better World. Really came out of my own creative process in a way. I, you know, through all my decades of searching and study, and, you know, deep dives into various religious traditions, I had reached a point where I had a panoply of practices. You know, I could go to drum circle, I could do sesshin, I could go to synagogue, I could go to church, I could sing gospel badly, but I still love to sing it. You know, I could do all of these things. I could do my yoga and my tai chi, but at the end of the day, I wasn't getting anywhere. You know, I really wasn't getting to that place. I mean, you know, sure, I'd had those transcendent experiences. I'd had the ahas, the awakenings, all of that stuff, but I didn't have a structure. It was just whatever sort of suited me for the day. And what I started to discover was that I needed that structure. And the traditional religious paths never, you know, with their doctrine and their dogma and all that stuff that we don't do very well, we don't like very much, right? They give you a structure. But if you're not following one singular path, then you really don't have one. You have to make it up, right? So what I did was research a lot of different structures, a lot of different rules of life, a lot of different precepts. So, you know, we've got the 10 Commandments, we've got the Eightfold Path, we have all of these different precepts that give you a structure, but nothing that felt contemporary, that felt flexible, that felt inquiry-based, not thou shalt not, but inquiry-based. And in that process, I dove deeply into the sacred texts and the teachings of all of these various traditions, all of our great traditions, and I looked for the common core. And when I found it, what I found were these 10 words, these 10 principles that are the common spiritual principles across the board. It doesn't matter what religion you're talking about, right? Because at their core, at their base, at their bottom, they're saying the same things. And this is what they're saying. This is how you connect. You connect to yourself, you connect to others, you connect to whatever you call the sacred. It's how you become better people in a better world, which is a large part of what spirituality is about. It's not just about sitting on your cushion going, oh, I just had the greatest meditation experience. Like, that's not what it is. That's not spirituality, So I found these 10 words and I got all excited. I was like, oh, here's my container. I've created this for myself. I was really excited. And I shared it with some colleagues and some friends, and they got really excited. So then we spent a year and we went through each one of these words for a month, really deeply exploring it, because I needed to find out if it worked. Is this really the container that I think it should be, that it is? And lo and behold, it did. And so the book is, that what came out of that process, that creative process of here are the 10 basic, fundamental spiritual principles for how we become better people in a better world. How do we connect more deeply to ourselves, to others, to whatever we call sacred? And it's all the same thing, right? And these principles also apply if we're talking about modern psychology or science. They're across the board. So they're very contemporary. They're not thou shalts or thou shalt nots. They're going to show up once you start paying attention to them, and attention's the first word. Once you start with these words, you'll see they show up every day. The first word is attention, right? Because you're not going anywhere if you're not paying attention. Right. That's just the basic. That's like having good boots on and a map. Like, you're not going, The interesting thing is that most modern spirituality stops there. Mindfulness, right? That's just the first step. It's really just the first step. So the first word is attention. The second word is acceptance, right? We have to learn to accept, even if we don't like it. We have to learn to accept. And every spiritual tradition talks about it, whether they call it God's will or, the now, the present, all of it. It's like, it just is what it is. You have to accept it. The third word is authenticity, right? What does it mean? What does authenticity mean? And that's, this is really the practice of these words, is that question. What does this mean? Not just, I can tell you what what the traditions have said about it. And that's what, part of what's in the book. But the real thing is, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to be authentic? Then the fourth word is benevolence, right? Which is basic kindness, like just, but it goes deeper than that. It goes deeper than just kindness. When we really start to investigate, what does benevolence mean? Good wishes. Well, that covers a lot of different things, right? The fifth word is balance. Every tradition, even modern science, even psychology, talk about we gotta find ways of keeping things in balance, whether it's ourselves, our bodies, our minds, or it's our relationships with others, or our relationship to the natural world, the world around us. The sixth word is contemplation, right? So this is kind of a fulcrum point. So contemplation is attention only at a higher octave. What are you paying attention to, right? It's when you open it up to the bigger picture, or whatever it is that you call sacred. It's that place of like, what is going on here, right? The sixth word is creativity, right? Because, as we've said, it's everything. The world is in a constant state of creativity. Science will tell you this, psychology will tell you this, spirituality tells you the same thing. The seventh word is collaboration. We work together, we collaborate, we go from the me to the we. What word am I at? The eighth word?
Yeah.
The eighth word. Wait, did I miss one?
You just said collaboration, so.
Oh, so the sixth word is contemplation. Seventh word, creativity. Eighth word is collaboration. The ninth word is celebration. Right? Celebration. That's where gratitude comes in. That's where joy comes in. You know, that we celebrate the simple fact that you exist is worth celebrating. Every single day, Meister Eckhart said, if you can say only one prayer, it's thank you. That's sufficient, right? So celebration is a form of gratitude, or gratitude is a form of celebration. And then the last word is care, right? And to care means to attend to give your attention to, only at that higher octave, right? So what you find with these 10 words is, though they appear to be separate words, they're really not. They're all related. There is this holistic path. And this is where they're different from the precepts or the 10 commandments, right? They actually form a complete path. And it's not a vertical path. It's a circular path or a spiral path, because you can go round and round.
How did you find these words? How did they come to you? How did you know you were moving from one thing to another? And also, why did you just get to A, B, C? You know,
Right.
like, was there something with it? Yeah.
Right. They all begin with A, B, and C. They're that foundational. You know, this is where there's that creative process that I can't explain to you, but they came in about 10 minutes. I just started writing and I got those 10 words and I went, I think that's it. I think that's it. You know, it just, I think they were a gift. They were just a gift, you know. I mean, obviously they came from years of deep study and deep practice, but when they arose, you know, it's like, where do those words come from? Where does the music come from? Where does the movement come from? Where does the line, the color come from? I don't know, but that's where they came from. I wish I could say it was more of a you know, focused process. But I think, you know, it's like we had a saying when I was in the theater, that everything's in the pre-production. If you do all your advance work, then the play plays, right? So I kind of feel like that's where these words came from. I have 60 years of advance work that they came from.
And how do you work through them? Like, how do you present them to the reader, or if you're doing them in your work with people, how do you work through those work?
Well, we start with the first word, right? So initially, I suggest that people go in order. There's the order has a power, because what you find is that each word just kind of naturally bleeds into the next one. You're not going to be able to do acceptance until you start paying attention, right? So I tell people, you know, start with the first word. And, you know, I suggest people take a month with the word. Just keep asking yourself questions. I mean, in the book, there are reflection questions. There are some suggested practices. There are a number of ways that you can engage these words for yourself, but they're not, that's like not all there is. You know, this is where your creativity comes in as well. Sometimes people will just put it on a sticky note on their computer or on their mirror and just keep that word in front of them. You know, you don't need to do it for a month. You could do it for a week. You could do it for, you know, 2 weeks. You pick your time, but a month gives you a lot of time, especially when you're busy. You know, it gives you a lot of time to just let the word seep in, let it deepen.
Yeah, beautiful. I like that. And I wanted to ask you before, actually, and I wrote it down so I didn't miss it. In your journey through all of these different modalities and practices, have you noticed what were the commonalities that you recognized within them? Because I think a lot of the time we kind of search and find that at the core there's a similarity, and then on the edges there are the differences. Like, that was my experience anyway. In seeing that so many different things, that, I mean, the intention for good, like, rested in the majority of them. There were some that were okay, but like in the majority of them, the intention was good, and there were people who were searching for something more as well. What was your experience in that quest through different modalities in your own spiritual journey?
Well, my experience is that if you go down to the core, to the root, before the doctrine and the institutions get added on, right, you go to the mystical root. And the mystics of all of the different traditions were saying the same thing, right? How do they describe or try to describe that thing that, or not thing, right? Depending on which tradition, but actually all traditions will tell you it's not a thing. This, whatever we call God or the sacred or source or ultimate reality or any of those things, right? We have all kinds of names. But at the root of it, they will all say it's not a thing. It's a process. It's a verb. It's not an actual thing. So it's not the dude with the gray beard. That, that's just it's a way of describing it so that it's more accessible for people. But if you go to the root, they were all saying, we can't describe it. It doesn't have language that is adequate. I discovered something really interesting that, in the biblical tradition, in the Hebrew Bible, the unpronounceable name for God, right, is YHWH or VH, right? Yahweh. That sound, is the sound of breathing. Right? And then you think about the traditions that talk about the breath. Right? And even the ancient Hebrew tradition talks about the ruach, the breath, which then the Christians call the Spirit, the Holy Spirit. But every tradition talks about breath. And what is breath? Breath is life. Breath is life. So what I found going all the way down is that they're talking about life. Life itself is sacred. And the process of life. Yeah. I'm curious what you found.
When people were less concerned with the external things, because there are in many spirituality kind of encompasses so many things now, so you can kind of like enter it at so many different points and think that you're in it. And depending on what you're looking for, or depending on what you recognize it gives you the opportunity to do, is then how much you then start to really kind of open up to what you're being led to, but then also know when it's time to go, when suddenly something starts to get a bit human and like you know what I mean? And then the reason that you went there seems to be lost in the ego and the humanity, right, and the hierarchy, and all of those kind of games kind of come in, and it just becomes something really different. Those are the reasons why I kind of moved around from things as well. And there was a time where I was like asking myself, why don't I just settle? Why am I constantly bouncing around and looking here and looking there? But I realized that was part of the thing. That was part of what was necessary for me to do, to, in one case, actually have this podcast, because then it means by going into all of these different areas and investigating all these different type of modalities and experiencing them to a level. So I had, a level of knowledge and a level of familiarity with the language of these things. then when I have guests that come from so many different backgrounds, I can at least, meet them, at the door with my layman's terms, just depending on how deeply I'd gone into those things. So with many things, I felt it drew people who were searching for something, and sometimes it drew us, it invited us because we were being attracted by our woundings, or sometimes we were being attracted by our heart, and it just depended, really. And also sometimes it would depend on the person who would be, the human who would be facilitating at the core ultimately, and where they wanted to go, and how pure their intentions were not. Did they want to create a space that was opening people up to that deeper level of themselves, or did they want to be at the at the front of something?
Right. Be the guru. Right.
Yeah.
And you bring up some really interesting points, which is the question that's at the heart of the search, right? And sometimes we don't even know. I mean, when I go back, it's what was leading me seeking was a question that I don't even know that I could formulate. I think that we have this urge, there's something in us that knows, like, it isn't just this. It isn't just this. There's something more here. And I think that the question is, what is it? Right? What is it? But that's such a vague question. It reminds me, I don't know if you know Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Douglas Adams, sorry. They create the supercomputer Deep Thought that comes up with the answer to life, the universe, and everything, which is 42. But then they realize they need the question. They need the question. And I think it's the question that drives us. And as you mentioned, sometimes we're wounded, we're in pain, we want answers, we want certainty, we want some kind of healing. That might be what propels us. Or it might be curiosity. I like to say that spirituality really kind of boils down to 3 questions. Who am I? Or what am I? What's going on here? Like, what's all of this? And how am I supposed to live in relationship to that? Those are the 3 questions. And I don't know that we can get answers to any of them.
Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the point, that we just don't know, but we spend time in search. The curiosity is what leads the creativity. The curiosity that is what guides the spirituality. And maybe the idea is that you never get there, and because you never get there, you just keep looking and deepening, and that opens you up to have a deeper experience of things by questioning. I think when you don't question, you think you have it wrapped, right. You become very stuck and rigid in what your idea of reality is. And I think also that's a very as kind of never-ending and as unsettling as that never-ending quest sounds like, it's still very fluid, so it's always, you're always meandering, you're always moving, you're always seeing something else, whereas if you hold on to something, whereas if you hold on to something, you're relying on that always remaining the same, and are not able to even consider that what you think is true could actually be something very different. And should anything shatter that for you, then that's going to be very difficult, more difficult than moving away from something and having the fluidity to go, okay, this isn't working anymore, I'm going to move, instead of staying there and praying over the ruins of something that you thought was what it really was. Yeah,
absolutely. And you're also describing the creative process, right? Like, that creative process is always driven by curiosity. What if? What if I did this? What if I did that? And you try it, right? And part of the creative process is an evaluative process where you go, yeah, no, that's not working. You need to, try it differently. Or you get to a place where you go, this is good. I like this. And now what happens if I do that? Right? It is that fluid process and that flexibility, that ability to move with things and not get stuck in certainty. I had somebody asked me once, what's the difference between spirituality and religion? And I'm like, religion gives you certainty. Spirituality gives you the question, right? It keeps you moving. Whereas, okay, I got it. I have the doctrine. I have the dogma. I know.
Mm.
Great. Fine. What if you don't? Right? What if that's wrong?
Yeah.
And I get people, so I'm also a hospice chaplain. So I work with people at the end of life. And oftentimes I will get questions of, I've believed X, Y, and Z my entire life. What if that's wrong? That's a real, crisis of faith right there at the end of like, what if that's wrong?
Mm.
Or you get people who are like, what if my belief that none of that stuff exists is wrong? Is it too late? I think that for us as creative spiritual beings, which are the same thing, that we have to be able to move. We have to stay flexible. The Taoist teachings are all about this, all about flexibility. Be like water, move where the water, move, don't get rigid.
I wanted to say as well about bringing spirituality to more people in the times that seem so rigid or seem so tumultuous. What can you speak to about that, or where do you see your work in facilitating, dropping little crumbs that would lead to people's curiosity and hopefully their awakening of seeing that there's more to it than, the drama?
Right. And especially right now, and where people are getting really fixated on their camps and their way of seeing things. I think regardless of what side of some issue you might be on, fundamentally, we can all agree that we would like to live in a kinder, more peaceful world in which everyone and everything has an opportunity to thrive. I think we put all underneath it. That's all any of us want. And I feel like it's during these times where the only thing we can fall back on is our spirituality. And especially, these 10 words, I didn't make the words up. I'll put it this way. I didn't make the principles up, right? The principles are the things that from time immemorial we've been trying to do because we know they help us become better people in a better world. They're the same principles. We have to go back to those principles. That's our anchor. That's our lifeline in a storm, is we go back to being benevolent. We go back to balance. We go back to paying attention, to accepting. We may not like it. It may really suck, but we have to accept that. Doesn't mean we don't work to make things better, but we have to accept what it is first before we can do that, right? We go back to collaborating with each other. We go back to taking responsibility for what we create in the world. We go back to caring for each other. That these are the things that help us survive and thrive, even in chaotic times. Flailing around thinking the world is ending and acting out of anger and outrage and fear are just going to make it worse. We have to come back to these principles that we know. We know these things. It's not, this isn't rocket science. We already know this. We just have to do it. And I think that that's our way of getting through what we're going to be going through. And I think we can all sense that, we all sense that we're going through something that's big.
And I think the understanding, it's getting back to, like you say, realizing that we all want the best, really, and whatever side we're sitting on, especially with you guys, and the, you know, we have it all over the world, is the reason that people kind of get pushed into one side or the other is because they believe something of that is going to create better for them. It's just unfortunate that we stop seeing the human behind those extreme beliefs, and we get kind of sliced down the middle and really shoved into corners to continue the fight with each other, whereas we're the solution of just going like.
And I think the difference is, you know, if that's coming out of fear or if it's coming out of love. Right.
It's more, it's at the moment it's all fear, isn't
All
it?
fear.
You know, if this happens, that's terrible. If that happens, it's all over. Yeah.
Right. It's all fear, right? And if what we're coming out of, and this is, you know, benevolence, the good wishes for all, regardless, right? We have to come out of that love. What do you love enough to take care of? What do you love enough to create? It has to come out of love. If it comes out of fear, we're doomed, because we'll flail around and we'll beat each other up and, you know, kaboom. But if it comes out of love, what can we create together? And I realize, you know, like there's some idealism in there. But if we don't have that idealism, then we're just going to be left on the battlefield with a lot of, you know, a lot of blood and a lot of pain and a lot of suffering.
But I think idealism is necessary when it comes to creativity. We have to be dreamers. Like, we have to go, well, imagine if that, you know, we got to that place, and then at least we strive for that. So to not be idealistic is actually, you know, putting a nail in our foot and stopping ourselves from even trying to go to the stars. You know, you try and go as high as you can and you see where you go, as opposed to going, no, it's all over. And nothing else can be possible as a result.
Right. I mean, you know, I recently wrote a piece. I write a Substack as well, Radical Spirituality, radical meaning root, right? Not, I mean, it's radical to be looking at it this way, right? But it means the root, you know, and wrote a piece about, you know, we need to not allow the sort of, you know, nattering nabobs of negativity to drive us into our little hovels, right? Into our little holes in the ground. We need to remember that we can change, like that there is possibility. If you go into that certainty of like the world's going to end, it's all over, it's terrible, that's it, you know, then there's no room for possibility. There's no room for imagine if. But if we can go to this place of maybe, I mean, you know, do you really have the master plan? Because I don't.
Right.
It's way above our pay grade. Like, we don't, you know, we're on a need to know basis. And right now we don't know. And we need to sit with the I don't know, which gives me room for possibility. You know, and possibility is what creativity is all about.
Fantastic, Lauryn. Beautiful conversation with you today as well. Please just share a little bit more about how to get to your book, your Substack, and anything else that you're offering.
Thank you so much. This is a great conversation. So, yeah, the book is available wherever books are sold. So 10 Words, an Interspiritual Guide to Becoming Better People in a Better World. You can find out more about me and about what I'm doing at my website, laurynaxelrod.com, LaurynAxelrod.com. Also check out Substack, Radical Spirituality. I write weekly, sometimes more than weekly, depends. And then, you know, Facebook and Instagram, all those places that where those sorts of things can be found. So
fabulous. Great to connect with you and great to have this conversation. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for what you're doing out in the world, merging spirituality and creativity. It's beautiful, empowering people. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauryn, for sharing your story and your wisdom with me. And thank you for listening. I will encourage you to share the episode with someone you feel will benefit from the wisdom of my guest, and also to leave a review. If you want to find out more about me, please go to my website. It's carolmaywhittick.com, carolmaywhittick.com. Also connect with me on LinkedIn and Facebook. It's Carol May Whittick, and on Instagram under Casmic. Once again, thank you for being with me, and I look forward to our next episode. Have a great week. Take care.